It is a rite of passage for exiting presidents to use their most absolute power for sometimes controversial exonerations. President Ford's legacy is thin grass growing under the dense shade provided by the memory of his pardon of President Nixon in 1974, just a month after Nixon resigned.
Pursuant to the pardon power conferred upon me by Article 2, Section 2 of the Constitution, have granted, and by these presents do grant, a full, free, and absolute pardon unto Richard Nixon.
And so there was just that one term for Gerald Ford. On President Carter's first day in office, he fulfilled a campaign promise to issue pardons to Americans who avoided serving in Vietnam by not registering for the draft or by leaving the country. I must say, given the preference, I prefer first day in office pardons to last day in office pardons. Red Sox fans, then mired in year 70 of the curse of the Bambino, will never forget 1989 when outgoing President Ronald Reagan pardoned Yankees owner George Steinbrenner, who had been indicted on 14 criminal counts of obstruction of justice and conspiring to make illegal contributions to President Nixon's re-election campaign. In contrast, Red Sox fans will never pardon Steinbrenner for Johnny Damon. In 2001, before leaving office, President Clinton pardoned his always entertaining half-brother Roger, who had been convicted on drug charges. A month after being pardoned, Roger was arrested for drunk driving. Now it's George W. Bush's turn. He has already used his pardon power 163 times, including commuting former White House aide Scooter Libby's 30-month prison term. So if you are looking for a pardon, now's the time to ask. Jailed media tycoon Conrad Black is already asking. Black was convicted on charges of obstructing justice and defrauding shareholders. Uncle Ted Stevens, until yesterday the highest-ranking convicted felon in the land, he said he is not looking for a pardon, but if he's sentenced to time in prison, I don't know, maybe he'll change his mind? And what about lame duck Vice President Dick Cheney, who was recently indicted in Texas, charged with engaging in an organized criminal activity in relationship to a federal detention center there? Bush is not going to let Cheney testify about anything, let alone spend even 1 second in the clink, right? Well, more than 2,300 people have applied for a pardon or commutation this year. It's the largest number of applicants in any single year since 1900. Who's likely to get them this year and why? Time to call in Jonathan Turley, professor of constitutional law at George Washington University. Professor Turley, thanks for your time tonight.
Hi, Rachel.
So first of all, the pardon power itself, it is often mocked. It is sometimes used to disgusting effect, but it does have a legitimate role to play in the justice system, right? There's sort of a case to be made that it is an honorable steam valve for the justice system as long as it's used well, isn't there?
It's exactly that. In terms of the intention of the framers, Alexander Hamilton was a great advocate for the pardon power because a legal system, even when it's acting appropriately, may sentence someone under the rule of law that equity demands a second look. And presidents have corrected problems in the legal system. John F. Kennedy pardoned people under the Narcotics Act, which was a very abusive act passed by Congress. And so there are some high moments. There are also some very low moments, which you just described well.
Constitutionally, can a president pardon him or herself?
That is a big debate among academics. Some academics say that this power is absolute and plenary, and so he can give a pardon to himself. I actually am not entirely convinced by that. The Constitution is written with a high sense of conflict of interest. That is, they want to avoid people who have a conflict of interest in making decisions. Congress giving itself pay raises, the vice president sitting on impeachment of the president. So the Constitution is designed to avoid that type of abuse of power. I think that a self-pardon by the president would raise very serious questions, and indeed I think it would trigger a constitutional amendment being offered to restrict this power from future presidents.
President Bush did not pardon Scooter Libby, the vice president's former chief of staff, but he did commute Libby's sentence. When we think about what Bush might do in his remaining days in office, do you think that we should look at Libby as a likely candidate for a full pardon?
I would be surprised that if Libby got another pardon. I'd also be surprised if Roger Clinton got another pardon. I'll go on the record as saying that won't happen. But with Libby, I would be very surprised. He got a commutation. It was very controversial controversial, not simply because a lot of people questioned whether he deserved it, but more importantly, this is a president who's been very miserly about pardons and commutation. He is the least sympathetic of any modern president to such requests. In fact, I think he's only given about 157. And that's a very low number. And so when he went out of his way to give Scooter Libby one, it raised questions. I'd be surprised if he gave him another one.
The last time that you were here on this show, we talked about the prospect that Bush might preemptively pardon a whole class of people who worked for him or who implemented certain policies. Is that still a possibility? Have they overtly tried to shoot down that speculation that we discussed last time?
No, I think it's a very strong possibility. You know, most of the arguments against these blanket pardons are going to the White House and saying, look, this would be an abuse of executive power, it would be the use of absolute power, it would set terrible precedent. Those are the very arguments this president's ignored for the last 8 years. And many people believe that this would be consistent with his view of the presidency. And in some ways, he may be emboldened by the fact that he doesn't have anything to lose. He could pardon posthumously, you know, Saddam Hussein, and his numbers wouldn't statistically go down. So there is a concern about that. It would set a very, very bad precedent because a president could effectively have the most felonious administration and then give a general pardon to everyone who helped him with his crimes.
Or at least try to, if he can try to get away with it. Jonathan Turley, professor of constitutional law at George Washington University. Happy Friday. Thanks for joining us tonight.
Thank you.